Hi everyone, welcome back to the Network State and New Countries webinar series. Today we are having our webinar number 8, and it covers one of the most challenging topics, the finances and funding topic. Because in the end of the day, most projects and most initiatives would fail if they, at some stage, they fail to raise funds and finance people working within the projects. Before giving the floor to our amazing speakers, I just want to give some background information. What we did actually with the Panarmenian Network State, and how it worked and how it didn't work. Actually, as many of you may know, the Pan-Armenian Network State was founded in 2021. After the Artsakh Nagorno-Karabakh war with Azerbaijan. So the idea came to my mind just, to create a platform where Armenian diaspora would be, I mean, engaging as a big player, as a in a truly functioning platform. So one of the ideas was to create a bank, but not the bank of the world that we have now. Fiat banks, but bank of talent, a bank of finances. How to connect the diaspora people. So we ran some projects, and most of them failed, and they failed because either we were in a hurry, we didn't prepare them correctly, or smoothly, or people were not ready for this type of project. So one of them was Arshak is here, actually, one of the early people within the network state, upon Armenian network state. So Arshak also remembers, one of the actually craziest projects. So we kind of organized a $1 per Armenian campaign. So that was a really crazy, thing, and it didn't work because it needed huge preparation, definitely. And the idea was we have the Gaudi temple in Barcelona, maybe many of you, and you know the story how it was built, or it is getting built, right? People would donate. So it. They have a basket, financial basket, so it gets built. So the idea was something like that. Armenians donating $1, which is nothing, especially for the Armenians living in the US or in France or whatever. And it failed. We also did some targeted fundraising with Armenian foundations, diaspora foundations. But in my opinion, still, it requires more analysis and feedback. It didn't work because I think that those foundations were not ready for this new type of thing. Network state, what is it? Because most people would think in a traditional way, especially in those diaspora organizations. I'm talking about big foundations, multi-million-dollar foundations who have robust trajectory, and people who live in the United States can know. Some of them, some are being founded. So we also did some individual reach out. This was very interesting, by the way, because I think this is one of the important moments in the entire network state movement, to cover some empty space, and fill it with visionary people. We kind of reached out to people who we thought could be visionary and invest in this type of venture, like the Pan Armenian Network State is. We succeeded at some point. Some people would donate some stuff. Some people would send money, just thinking that this is important. We are building a platform, so it will function. But in the end of the day, it didn't become sustainable and long term and robust. So I can say that it failed as well. So we also did try some Web3 build up of Web3 platform, like building up, how to say it, um, like a virtual Armenia, something like that. So Armenians would enter their so their house, their office, etc. You guys, I mean, can I mean imagine how important it is for Armenians. Like, I mean, living outside. I mean, getting connected. I mean, it's also so we're kind of trying to play with the connection, ethnic connection, so that they would definitely be interested in investing in this type of project. So in the end of the day, as I say, I mean, in all those projects, I mean, partially succeeded, partially failed. But now we are working on a global scale. So because we understand, we have realized actually that the ecosystem is one for all of us. I mean, whether it's a Pan-Armenian or I don't know, Pan-Irish or Pan-Indian or whatever way we call them, or no, like blockchain communities, whatever, because in the end of the day, people want order, a new order, whether we call it a decentralized order, a libertarian order, or whatever. That's how we came up also to this, I mean, webinars to cover all these topics. So one of the dreams actually that I have had during this journey of 3 years, I mean, of this network state stuff, is that I always thought of having a bank of talents. I mean, people who work in the network states sector, like network state new countries, intentional communities, private cities. So all those people um, should kind of have an access to kind of a bank, but not bank in a traditional sense like we have had in terms of like Westphalia system, like nation state system, but banks in terms of visionary people getting together with talents and building up something new in order to jump to a critical mass level. Because we need new people definitely, and for that, this type of project require huge funds and finances, and blockchain decentralized solutions are here to serve, but still I mean, we need visionary people with money who can kind of uh, put their I mean money into this type of project, because we are talking about grandiose big civilizational transition, like building up something new, like new society, and it requires funds. I mean, whether it's crowdfunding, as I said, blockchain decentralized way, or whatever, we still need visionary people to reach out to. This is my thinking. I don't know. Maybe I am wrong, but this is important in terms of jumping to a critical mass level. This is my opinion. I don't know. Maybe I'll change at some point. But I would like actually to hear more from our speakers who can tell more and to share their experience, their um actually fundraising experience as well, because this is very important. I mean, to understand, I mean, where, I mean, what are the options, or what are the opportunities that people can consider. And our first speaker is Steve. Steve represents the New Nation Project. Steve, thanks a lot for joining us. And please, you have 10 minutes. Please share your experience, your thoughts, and welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me along. I'll try and keep it well with under the 10 minutes to allow more time at the end for everybody else. So I'm part of a project called New Nation Project. The original project was focused on claiming terra nullius. The area of land that we were looking at was Bertawil, in between Egypt and Sudan, and that was sort of the spark or the inspiration for pursuing the new nation. We were inspired by what Liberland had been doing with the terra nullius there in Europe. Fortunately, because Bertawil was quite a common domain name, we ended up choosing New Nation Project as an overall name, which was quite good because we did make some progress reaching out to people in Egypt and Sudan. And then, unfortunately, the civil war broke out, which effectively meant what was a very, very difficult, almost impossible project became genuinely impossible, for at least for the foreseeable future. So we were open to other areas of territory. But of course, there's apart from Europe, there's really only other area of terra nullius is down in Antarctica, which is not really an area that I think is viable. So looking at what the groups like Charter Cities and Free Cities Institute have been doing with other nations, with the special economic zones and special administrative regions and charter cities, we thought, well, maybe the approach is to look at areas that already are under a host nation, but if there's something that we can do there in terms of creating a new city-state or a new nation as part of that. And I think I just want to share a little short story. I'm an insurance broker by trade, and I have quite a few clients, and I've got a lot of clients who insure their properties with us. And we've got lots of families who will buy houses, and they'll buy a second or third house, and it's for their children, not to live in, but as a inheritance for them. And they'll work for decades and years and years. They'll put a lot of money into it. They'll pay off the loan. They'll maintain the property. But their intention is that when they retire, when they pass away, this will pass down to their children. And so they insure those properties with us. And if you were to try and buy that property, they wouldn't sell it because it's theirs. And the intention of that property is to pass on to their children. And it's a very Australia has because I'm in Australia, by the way. Australia has sort of a lopsided relationship with property. I think as a society, we value home ownership and property ownership maybe a little bit higher than we should compared to other types of assets. But that is what it is. So it's very, very important for Australians to own property, and it's seen as something that at least the older generation wants to hand down to their children. Now, the other case, you've got plenty of people who don't have the money to buy a house, and even if they did have the money or access to capital to buy a house, there may be places where there's no house available. So what do you have? Do you have people who own 3 houses, 2 of which are empty for 30 years, and then you have 2 or 3 families who are homeless living on a tent? No, that doesn't happen. What happens is the family that owns the house, they're keeping it for their children as an investment. They rent the house out. They don't sell the house. They don't give up sovereignty over their house. They don't let it go to anybody else. But for a period of time, when they're not using it, they agree to rent it to people on agreeable terms. And those people who can't afford a house or maybe don't want to buy a house, or if there's no houses available, they'll rent. That's what I did with my family for many, many years before we were able to buy a house. We rent the house. And when we rent the house, we know that we've got complete freedom within the house to do as we want within the terms and conditions of the lease. And we know that at the end of that time, we will move on to some other place and we'll hand the occupancy back to the landlord. So I think I bring that up because in the New Nation Network State sort of community, there's a lot of talk about land and buying land or going to places, and eventually we just buy it from a state. We're just going to go to a state and buy it. And sometimes the idea of nations that maybe have lower GDP or maybe higher debt, the idea is that, oh, well, they'll obviously sell us land. They'll just sell us sovereignty. And I think we sometimes underestimate how important sovereignty is in land to countries. And our approach has been not to go out and look at any place to buy, it's to lease. And the example we like to use are the sovereign leases that have happened, for example, in Hong Kong, notwithstanding the fact that what led up to that lease was a little bit not voluntary, but look at the lease itself. The UK effectively had jurisdictional authority over Hong Kong, except Kowloon Walled City, for 99 years. And at the end of that 99 years, China was able to take Hong Kong back as per the lease. It was a peaceful handover. And whilst we don't know the future of Hong Kong at the moment, it's been a special administrative region since then. There are more examples recently of these sovereign leases. Somaliland and Ethiopia are negotiating one at the moment for a port in the Gulf of Aden. And a few years ago, back in 2018, I think it was a deal, the deal was done, Turkey was able to lease Sorkim Island from Sudan. This is before the war, which was an old Ottoman fort. And they've now got that as sovereign Turkish territory again for 99 years. So it's not uncommon for these things to happen, and that's the approach that we've taken. At the moment, we've talked to a few nations. Anyone involved in the project will know the nation that we're talking to at the moment, but we're not making it public at this point, largely because it's only a handful of members of parliament that we've been speaking to. So we're not going to make any of that information public, just out of respect. We've told them that until they're prepared to accept a formal proposal to the whole parliament, we will not mention their name. It's not completely confidential, but it's just out of respect to not let information get out and potentially cause any issues for those members of parliament who haven't yet been advised of our proposal. Now, our proposal hasn't been accepted. It's merely being listened to. So there's no guarantee that it'll even proceed more than just a mere proposal, but we will be visiting them in the near future to meet in person. And we've had discussions with cabinet members via conference so far. In terms of funding, though, which is what this is all about, there's, I suppose, 3 stages. The first stage of this particular project with the host nation to get a sovereign lease is just the angel round, where we're basically funding the trips back and forth, engaging lawyers to lodge the documentation with the parliament, and the various incidentals that just come around with pursuing this sort of thing. So far, that this project, going for over 2 years, has really been self-funded. There's no real funding at all. Anyone who joins the New Nation project or Eleutheria as a virtual citizen, it's completely free. There's no income from that. We have no income generating activities. So it's all effectively been self-funded. We're doing an angel round to raise just 10,000 Australian to complete that. We've raised over 6, so there's a little bit left to go. It'll get funded somehow in the next couple of weeks or a month before we need to use all those funds. The next stage would be, if we were to get a memorandum of understanding with the nation, then we're looking at a venture capital firm who specializes in this sort of area to look at working with us to advance the project. The project would then be a good 12 months or more of negotiation, going back and forth to the nation in person, presenting detailed plans, talking about the different treaties, the different legal structures, how much autonomy would we have? Would it be more like an actual special administrative region? Would it be full Hong Kong type sovereignty? Would it be more like a special economic zone? That's a discussion to have. Obviously, there's members of parliament, cabinet members to involve. So that period of time, it's not capital intensive because we're not breaking ground, we're not doing anything, we're not manufacturing anything, but it's just a lot of back and forth with people. The third stage, which is if we get the agreement with the host nation, then we can actually launch as a free private city-state. The funding then will come from land sales. And that's fairly typical with any private city, any charter city project, is that you'd basically you'd raise the capital to develop it by selling the land. The one difference that we have, and I know I'm at 9 minutes, so I'll quickly finish up. The one difference we have is that our legal jurisdiction will allow full use of blockchain technology and tokenization of real world assets without having to go through any legal hoops like you do in the rest of the world. So we hope that would open up a lot more liquidity in the blockchain area as well as the traditional land property development capital market. So that's how we plan to do it, and I'll leave it at that for the rest of the group. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Very interesting. I'm following the developments of your project, and I'm a fan of it. And I actually will urge people to follow. Actually, in the press release, we'll put more details on each project so that people can get a better clue to what we are talking about. And definitely, I mean, there will be a lot of people who would like to support, and also on diplomatic front, I would be very happy to support as well. I mean, in terms of negotiations, talking to governments, I have some experience. Thanks a lot. And our next speaker is Alpha from the New Earth. Alpha is the founder and CEO of New Earth. Alpha, please, stage is yours.
Thank you for inviting me, Vahram. So I think I'm probably one of the few ones here who comes from the perspective of like, I need to know about others' backgrounds, but having been in the network space for the last 3 years, from more from the Silicon Valley angle. So I don't know if I can share my screen, if that's okay with you, Vahram. Okay. Give me one sec. Okay, cool. So can anyone see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my background, I was actually one of the founders of Afropolitan. I think it's one of the first network state projects that actually raised venture capital. So we raised about 2.1 mil from prominent VCs, primarily in the crypto space. And what we found, oh, sorry. And I also was a founding member of Praxis. So Praxis is, I think, one of the more prominent network state projects. Raised about $20 million from Paradigm, Apollo, Sam Altman, and a lot of the more prominent figures in Silicon Valley. And so what we actually found in the process of talking to VCs about the space is that they're very, a lot of them are very excited to be a part of it. But I think after a couple of years in our experience with venture capital as one of the key sort of sources of capital to fund these projects is they're very, very bad fits. Because I think as Steve just said, a lot of the early stages of these projects, you're basically negotiating a lot with governments to get a bunch of concessions. And this doesn't really map out well with the kind of return profiles and timelines that venture investors want, right? They want 10x returns within 3 to 7 years or something like that. And so, the experience that we had was essentially, being a founder of a network stage project demands like having more creativity around how you can finance these things, especially in the early stages, and especially if you're not also building a charter city attached to it. So Afropolitan wasn't doing that, but Praxis was, and so I had more of a firsthand sort of perspective on how that happened. And so basically, the strategy at Praxis was, let's use crypto and the narrative of crypto, but not simply as a tactic, as a tool, but also something we believe in. But around 2022, when we actually raised the 15 million, the idea was essentially to simply, leverage the crypto angle and sort of pitch that as a haven for a lot of people who wanted to actually leverage those technologies to the fullest extent. And so that's where a lot of the Paradigm was able to be one of the lead investors there. So you need to have one of these sort of like activating narratives to make sure that you can actually fund the initial more, gray early days, so that you can actually get the kinds of concessions you need to really be talking to sovereigns and mayors and the like. But I think when we talk broadly, stepping back, what actually the product of network states are, to me, the way I like to frame it is, it's like what you're selling is 10x better socioeconomic coordination than the nation state. And what that means fundamentally is that, what is socioeconomic coordination? It's basically the kind of human capital you can aggregate. So if you were to boil down these projects to their fundamental root, is how much high quality human capital you can aggregate in one space, and how you can leverage that to get more capital. Because I think, having done this for the last 2 years, the song and dance of talking to governments and trying to get them to see what's valuable, what's not, give us some land, some sovereignty. The reality is they have no real incentive to do that unless you're providing them a high density of talented future, basically a future tax base, right? So that's kind of how they would see that. And so that does change the sort of calculus. Obviously, this is just to show that, like, the downward effect, sort of trickle down effect of how human capital basically turns these projects into viable investment opportunities. So what I want to sort of suggest moving forward is other founders in this call and in the space broadly who want to raise for these projects is, we built communities of about 40,000 people at Afropolitan, about 50,000 at Praxis. That's a lot of people, but the reality is, like, you actually probably need about 5,000 to 6,000, but all of them, each user adds tremendous amount of value than the last user, than the last member of the community. And then from that sort of, high density of human capital, you can fund your initial stages of your project, probably to to the rate of about, I don't know, 5, 10, 20 million, like we did at Praxis, that buys you the kind of time and the kind of legitimacy and the kind of sort of initial exploratory phase you need to really get the kinds of concessions that would make your project real. So the way I want to think about it politically is like, this is a classic, Robert Mickle's iron law of oligarchy, where it's like, you think because it's a network project, you need millions of people, but really you need about few 10, 5,000 people really well coordinated who could actually contribute to your project immediately. And you can think of it as a kind of voluntary taxation where, it's opt-in and you get people to basically buy into your project financially, so with real stake. And that sort of allows you to basically give them a real sense of contributing to the future life of your project while also funding the early stages. So that's I know a lot of people probably more with a libertarian background, the word taxation is probably awful to hear on this kind of space, but it's just a framework, right? Like you want your first few members actually to just be a potential future elite if you think about it in a political sense, and that's the sort of, I think, the only way you can get them to do that. I think venture funds are just not the right partners for these kinds of projects long term. They think they want to be, but frankly, because of the LP interest and what they actually want from these investment profiles, I don't think it's a good fit. Probably maybe when you have already, I don't know, land, 10 million people already in your community, a few products that you're running, probably on-chain products, a currency, then I think VC probably supercharges this space. But I think a lot of products in this space right now are just not there yet, including some of the ones that I participated in. So I'll stop there. I think that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Alpha. Thank you for sharing the projects and also your thoughts. And yeah, I think we already have one question for you in the chat. So
Sure.
During the Q&A session, we are going to cover it.
Okay.
So our next speaker is Federico from Fabrica. Federico, please share your experience and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Federico. I go by Fede. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Fabrica. And what we do is that we bring real estate on chain. So we tokenize properties in the US. And we have taken a very different approach from other companies that you might have heard of in terms of tokenization. So we started not with fancy buildings or residential properties. We started with undeveloped land, undeveloped plots of land. And we have taken a bottom-up approach, basically, as starting to on-ramp like inexpensive properties and get to understand the legal framework and like how to do it technically. And that has allowed us to start with cheap properties and over time expand to more and more valuable properties. We started the project 6 years ago, so we've been around for a while in the tokenization space. We like to say that we are the OG of real estate tokenizations. We are a VC-backed company, so we have venture capital here in the US. I'm based in San Francisco. We have big investors. We have Mark Cuban as an investor. And over the last 5 years, we have tokenized over 500 properties. So we started with a small plot of land, and over time, we started like mapping the whole legal frameworks across the US. And we have put together like over 20 licenses to operate and bring real estate on chain. The interesting thing that we do is that we clearly sit on top of the existing legal framework and we use it, but we have built a way that essentially the whole protocol is fully decentralized. So anybody can come in and say, hey, you know what? I want to validate new properties and maybe extend the system outside of the US. And we have a whole framework ready for that. So I would say like half of the project is like designing it for a future where decentralized entities bring properties on chain in different legal jurisdictions, figuring out a way to do it from a legal standpoint on the ground. But there's a larger framework that allows anybody to come in and compete and build that long term. At the same time, we were well aware that you need to have a clear use case today. So we have a product that people use today to bring real estate on chain, to facilitate real estate transactions fully on chain within seconds instead of the traditional weeks-long process. So product use case one is someone who wants to buy and sell land, and they can do it on our platform instantly as any other digital asset. And product number two was opening up the financial component of real estate. So once you have tokenized an asset and brought it on chain, how do you use it as a financial primitive so that you can get loans? And we have a partnership with a lending protocol on chain. So if you on-ramp, as we say, your plot of land, you can borrow against it on chain. So there's a decentralized market of lenders that provide capital for people who own properties. And to make it more tangible, I want to show it to you because that's a real product and it's live, and that's what it looks like. So you're seeing like the main application with all the properties that are like on the marketplace at the moment. And you'll see that we have properties that are like quite valuable. Like there's a plot of land in Los Angeles, a farm in Colorado, we have properties in Georgia, New York State, Utah. And you can scroll down to cheaper properties. Some of them are like small plots of land in Arizona. But the beauty of it is that anybody can put an offer and buy the property and transfer them as tokens instantly on chain. And you can take loans on the properties and you can offer loans if you want. And all that is designed to be fully decentralized. Again, you can come on the platform, mint your own property and add them. We provide a legal framework to do it. We use a trust as a container for the title that gets recorded at a local county. So that's a bit technical, but essentially what we do when we add a property to the system, we technically put the title, so the ownership of a property, into a legal entity, a trust instrument that gets recorded at the local jurisdiction, and that entity is attached to a token. And ownership of a token essentially determines ownership of a trust that holds the title. So in a few words, if you own the token, the NFT, you own the trust that owns the property. So the property is yours. We're not in the middle of it. It's fully decentralized. Literally, if you own the token, if you are in possession of a token, you have full control and ownership of a property, and you can do whatever you want with it, develop it, sell it, and so on. So let me show you like my portfolio. I have a few properties on the platform, and this is all like on mainnet. That's actual properties, no test cases. So this is a small property in Arizona. You can see that I got loan offers. So if I were to click on, I can click on borrow and continue, and I can get real US dollars instantly on chain within seconds and borrow against my plot of land on chain. So why I think that's very relevant for what you guys do and the network states and so on is that we all know that eventually network states will have to form on the ground. They're forming on the ground. Some started like with the concept like first a community and then you want the land. But you will eventually want to bring land territories owned or managed by communities. And the last mile is giving those communities the ability to do it fully digitally. You cannot expect to do it like using traditional deeds because that's not flexible at all. It's very old, slow method of owning real estate. Deeds were invented in the Middle Ages and we still use them everywhere, but clearly we need a better approach. And that's what we are proposing. And an early signs of this is that we have a couple of DAOs that own properties this way. So for example, this farm in Colorado is actually owned by a DAO. It's called the Cougar DAO. It's pretty cool. It's a DAO that formed by itself, and they decided to acquire property and use it for farming purposes. And they have a digital asset to represent full ownership of a property. So that's a bit about us and our project and how I see it coming in the larger network state narratives. And I'm very, very curious to hear your thoughts or question. Actually, Joshua, I'm reading live from the chat, if that's fine for you. How does property token support liquidity? What do you see is the response from debt financing in regards to property on chain? That is a very good question. So owning real estate and land on chain is very new for many people. And so traditional lenders are kind of like shy at the moment. We're like looking at it and say, okay, this has potential, but I'm not sure we're ready to provide capital there. The interesting part though is that like we're like really keeping an eye on us and the whole like movement toward that direction. They see that as the future. Meanwhile, we're talking with existing on-chain lenders. There's a pretty large group of people who have been providing capital on-chain, lending capital, especially in the NFT space. So there are like NFT lenders that provide money to people who owns NFT, and those NFT owners are borrowing capital from them. So there are marketplaces that are developed around that. And we're now talking to them because that's the beauty of it, is that we bring in an asset class that it's very valuable, it's more stable than JPEGs and art NFTs. At the same time, it's wrapped in a digital instrument that they know very well. So they know that they can provide capital and borrow instantly, borrow and lend capital around those assets, and they know how to do it. And it's a way for them to diversify their portfolio and their investments into a new asset class that is coming on chain. And the beauty of it is that it solves a real world problem. Some of those landowners don't have other ways to raise capital. If you own a plot of land, one thing is owning like a house in California. Of course, you'll find capital. It's very easy. But if you own a small plot of land, say that it's worth $20,000 somewhere in Arizona, you don't just go to a bank and ask for a loan. It's going to take you like months. You probably get very poor terms, and it's super painful to go through the process. While if you tokenize it and bring it on chain and say, hey, I have this $20,000 property for a lender giving you a loan instantly for, say, $5,000, $10,000, it's really effortless, and they'll do it. So we're seeing like landowners getting access to capital that they didn't have. And the beauty of it is that it scales very well. So in the US alone, there are over 100 million plots of land. There are like, most of them didn't get any access to capital, and we're connecting all the players in there. And since the system is designed to be adopted everywhere else, we're talking with companies outside of the US or like new players who want to do that in existing jurisdictions or in new jurisdictions that they are creating, which I think is super promising and very aligned with the network state trend.
Thanks a lot, Federico. Thanks a lot for sharing. And
Thank you.
we are going to talk more during the Q&A session about all this. Very interesting, really. And I think also that it also kind of corresponds to the network state ideology of like, I mean, how people in different parts of the world can acquire land. And we had a webinar. I think it was the second webinar we were talking about the land acquisition. So this is very interesting. Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is Jonathan, who has initiated the Nova Messiah project. Jonathan, welcome, and please share your experience.
Yes. Hello to everyone, and thank you, Vahram, for the invitation to speak here. I have an comparatively exotic topic, and I want to share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Nova Nikaya is a project for Christianity in free cities and libertarian communities. And I initiated this project around a year ago. Yes, I have a brief structure of my presentation today. I will start with a brief introduction to Christianity and libertarianism, followed by how I got to the idea of the Christian libertarian polity, the name, the stages of embodiment that are planned and partly already running, and then the current situation. Yes, Christianity and libertarianism is an interesting topic because it's sometimes a bit controversial, but I have some or two little quotations from the Bible, from the New Testament, which shows that libertarianism and Christianity very well fits together. So the Apostle Paul wrote to the Corinthians, now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is liberty. And to the Galatians, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not entangle again with a yoke of bondage. And with this quotations, I will start on the topic because I'm convinced that that the Christianity is a religion of freedom and liberty. And thus I came to the idea to create a project that aims to build up a Christian libertarian polity. The pioneers of classic liberalism, such as John Locke, derived their ideas directly from the Bible. In our days, of course, the mainstream liberalism has moved far away from these principles, but the libertarianism has not. The libertarianism has retained the principles of the classical liberalism, and so you can say it is in the tradition of the classic and sometimes Christian liberalism from former times. On the other hand side, in the Western world, Christian values are increasingly in the defensive, and Christian people often are a minority in their traditional homelands. So that's why the idea arose to build an independent Christian polity. And as an example how that could happen, I have the example of another religious group, the Jewish people, that, yes, as we all know, managed to build up their own country in the last century. And why shouldn't that also be possible for a much bigger religious group? I see in the concepts of free private cities and network states optimal conditions for such a project. And I think Nova Nikaya opens devout Christians an alternative to existing states. And on the other hand side, from the perspective of free private cities, of network states, and other libertarian communities, it is a new target group that is addressed, and quite interesting because it is a quite large target group. So far to how I get to the idea. A short introduction to the name. The reference for the name is the ancient city of Nicaea in Asia Minor. In the English-speaking world, often it's pronounced Nicaea, but the Greek pronunciation is Nicaea. That's why I use that pronunciation. And there took place the first ecumenical church council in the 4th century, and the first Christian creed was formulated there, and that is the only creed in which all ancient particular churches agreed. and therefore it's a symbol for the unity of the entire Christianity, and that's why we choose the name Nova Nikaya for the project of a Christian libertarian movement. Now to the stages of embodiment. We come to the practical part. Firstly, we are establishing an online community, spreading the idea, and we prepare and plan the next steps. The online community is still working. You see the QR code. If you're interested, you can join. And the aim is to recruit responsible persons and possible settlers, and build up digital and organizational structures. And I think in the next months it will be developed as a kind of network state or association. The next stage will be relocation. Relocation to a free city of the acting people and the technical structures. What are the goals? Firstly, more scope for action than in highly regulated countries. I myself live in Germany, and I think everybody knows Germany is maximum regulated. So we wish to have a jurisdiction where the regulation is much lesser. Then to gain experience with living in libertarian communities, to build up a physical contact point where people can go and speak to us and meet us. And of course, it is our expression of the support of the idea of free private cities. And this stage is planned for next year. And afterwards, the aim is to build Christian polities in free private cities as a global network. And there there can be a range from small church congregations within a free private city to partially self-governing Christian city districts. So many is possible, much is possible, and the Christian community should be an integral part of libertarian jurisdictions and communities, and should take responsibility, for example, for education or for charity, which are Christian main strengths where we can serve the community. Further stages of embodiment.
Jonathan, we are running out of time. Sorry, could you just sum up, paraphrase?
Okay. Yes, I'm really at the end of the presentation. Further stages of embodiment could be a free Christian private city, or even a confederation of some cities. Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Thanks, so very interesting. I mean, maybe you know that we Armenians have this title of as the first Christian nation, because we were the first country to accept Christianity as a state religion. This is very interesting, because when you mentioned Nicaea, Armenians were taking part in that, conference, definitely. And in 301, Armenia adopted Christianity. Before Nicaea, Armenia adopted Christianity as a state religion. Yeah, this is very interesting, because why I mentioned this, because I know an Armenian officer. I cannot say the name, of course, and the title, but a high-level officer working in a government of Armenia, who once told me something very interesting, that one of the missions that Armenians can play in the world is to reform Christianity. This was very interesting to me when you mentioned these Christian communities using our DNA and like Christian DNA and that long history of Christianity that we have in ourselves. This is super interesting. I would definitely talk to you more about this. Thanks a lot. Definitely, I would like to hear more about, I mean, how you see the funding structure, but maybe we cover it during the Q&A session, and we'll also have other sessions as well. So I got a question that DNA has a religious background. DNA as in a like not in a direct sense. I mean historical memory, to put it that way. Maybe DNA was not the right way. I mean to describe the historical memory that Armenians have regarding Christianity. Anyway, I mean, let's jump to the questions. Before, I mean, getting to actually to people to raise hand and ask questions, we already have some questions written in the chat. Let me see. John actually has a question for Alpha. Alpha, you have a question. John actually asking that, have you considered using national debt to finance the acquisition of new territory? And
yeah, no.
Yes, you could see it. I mean, that, for example, tell nation A, if you give us a
Sure.
few square miles of worthless backcountry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Please,
So
I mean, if you can get a, I mean,
yeah, that's definitely something we thought about. And it's a great idea. But I think once again, as I mentioned during the talk, the hardest thing we found in talking to governments was first of all selling them on the idea that selling them the slice of the community we were building in the first place, because we were going first with both Afropolitan and Praxis, a community first approach. So we aggregated the demand first, and then we're engaged with governments on that basis. But like, I think this is sort of a conversation you have with them, once you have you sort of de-risk demand to a significant level, right? Otherwise, you kind of like just sound a bit crazy. There's another question about whether Afropolitan and Praxis are still active. Yes, they are. Afropolitan, I'll link it in the chat, is still active, making money, selling services to the community. I left the project to work on New Earth. We're building directly technology for network state projects and adjacent. And Praxis is also still active as well. They're much more further along. They've enlisted a bunch of prime ministers, ex-prime ministers from the EU to actually lead their land acquisition process. So they're doing pretty well as far as I know. And then just real quick, I think I got a bunch of questions there. Okay.
There's one also question from Joshua about VC and I mean about resources.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, so I think, look, honestly, I'll be frank with you. I will just simply write off VCs. I think VCs, unless you're raising from Peter Thiel, I think everyone else is kind of a joker. They're all kind of, it's just a lot of VC now is just a lot of people who would have worked on Wall Street just kind of masquerading as VCs. They don't really take those kinds of risks, and it's just very, very hard to pitch them building a new country, right, to their LPs. So I think maybe Balaji and Peter Thiel, if you can manage to get in front of them, they'd back you. But before doing that, you need to have de-risk a lot of things before they even take you seriously, because they've invested a lot in this space already. They've been burned already. Praxis is one of their projects. So you need to demonstrate that you're way ahead of these other projects before coming to them. So yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Alpha. Thanks. If Arshak, you have a question. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I also have a question for Alpha. So couple questions actually.
Okay.
Human capital, it means a goodwill.
A goodwill. I think economically speaking, I don't think that would count, but I was talking more in terms of economic capital, to be honest. But I think that for network states to truly be differentiated from, I think, nation states, that could be definitely something that is integrated and included in the perspective, in the framework.
That brings to the second question, how to monetize goodwill or human capital.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for example, one thing that we talked about at Praxis was like creating some sort of global talent fund. And one vector of that talent fund was going to be a very sort of character-based analysis of individuals. Because the thing that you have as a network state that nation states don't have is you can actually sort of garden your culture in a way that those products can't. And so quantifying that, I think it's probably the wrong frame. I don't think you can really quantify goodwill, but I think you can sort of do an analysis by association where people who sort of have demonstrated goodwill and are sort of vouched for by people who have done the same can be a good proxy of verifying how someone with a good character can be and great talent to match can be a part of your founding culture.
Great, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alpha. We have other questions. Anyone who raised his hand? Let me check, because my screen doesn't show all participants. There's someone who wants to speak. Joshua,
microphone work?
Yeah, Joshua, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Sorry. Yeah, good question. Maybe on the human capital approach also. One of the things we've been thinking about in my own project is exactly that. How do we calculate or account for value of contributions? And so maybe Alpha or somebody who's been in the space, maybe Andy even dancing over there, any systems out there or ways to potentially value and account for contributions, practical professional contributions based on regular acknowledged market values. So if someone is, for instance, some kind of professional service, we know roughly what the market value is for that service. We may be able to account for that, whether it's an equity or some kind of economic or tokenomic type of solution within the community. Any thoughts on those?
Perfect. Thanks, Joshua. I also have one question for Jonathan, because what Jonathan is present is something super interesting in terms of the civilizational transition, because we as a Panarmenian Network State have been working on this topic, like civilization transition, how to kind of build a bridge as a communicator between civilizations, cultures, peoples. And this Christian libertarian initiative is super interesting. How, Jonathan, do you think you're going to talk with other religious currents? This is super interesting because as an Armenian, we have had huge experience, and I can claim this. I mean, here freely. I mean, especially with Islam, and but also with other, I mean, religious currents. How do you think? I mean, this libertarianism, Christian libertarianism, can work together with for example, Sharia Islam, if we put it that way. But of course, I mean, there are other Islamic currents as well, which are more, I mean, open to coexistence and cooperation. But just, I mean, trying to give you a clue to what I mean. I mean, because if you want to understand the Armenian perspective, I mean, how we think, I mean, there is a big Armenian community living in Iran, and we are one of the most respected Christian community in Iran, if not the most respected. And there are a lot of Armenian churches there, and we are accepted totally into Iranian society. So, and Iran is considered in the Western world as a radical Islamic country, which of course is not, in my opinion. But anyway, I mean, let's not get into that political discussion now. So how you think that this coexistence and cooperation could work, and in terms of also raising funds? I mean, how you think that you are not gonna get hindrances on your way because of also these religious conflicts, if you put it that way?
I think there don't have to be religious conflicts if we have an libertarian structure where everybody has the right to live as he or she wants. What I could very well imagine is a kind of a free city or libertarian community with different parts. For example, Christian quarter, a Muslim quarter, a Jewish quarter, an hedonistic quarter, whatever, and which have their special traditions, their cultural heritage, which accept each other and do not intervene in in each other's interests and affairs. So I think it's a question of non-aggression.
Thanks a lot. Since we are running out of time, we just need to finish after 2 minutes because we are already out of time because the webinar was 1 hour. Just one thing, I mean, and maybe we'll hear the last question. The Greater Middle East actually was like that before the nation states. If you go back into history, the Greater Middle East, from India to Maghreb to Morocco, etc., if you call it that way, before the nation states, it was living that way. I mean, like the Jewish quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Iranian quarter, Persian, of course. I mean, that time, the Islamic quarter, etc., etc. But before the nation state, when the nation states came, everything changed. But this is a very tough topic, and we are going to have a discussion on this topic. This is a very political and interesting topic. So, anyone, please, the last question, please, and then we close the session.
I think Andy had was asked to answer a question.
Oh, okay. Okay. Andy?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, Joshua asked about finding ways of incentivizing and, as I understand it, and rewarding people that participate in network states, particularly, I believe, at the foundational level when things are starting to organize. And as far as I can tell, when you're in that bootstrapping phase, for the most part, it's going to be something like the equivalent of a safe note. But when it comes to equity for services, that's what I would say. And let's face it, this is still very experimental, but we're also in an incredibly capital-intensive industry, because ultimately it's not just about keeping the lights on, putting food on the table, which is a must. And I think this is a subject that's not discussed openly enough. I know, Vahram, you and I and others have discussed this quietly, and that is, many of us would like to be all in and to do this full time, right? And to not have to do a side hustle, to not have to go out there and flip hamburgers or flip houses or whatever it is that we got to do, and to make this a 100% thing. And so, yeah, we got to talk more about not just raising money, but monetization and paying ourselves first. Okay, that is a really important thing. There's no shame in that. You want to be taken seriously, you got to know what you're worth, and you say, this is what I'm worth, And if you're not willing to go along with that, God bless you, you're great, but I'm moving on to someone else that's willing to fund me. Alpha's right. A lot of these VCs, they don't get it. They don't understand. And by the time they do, it might be a little bit too late for some of them. You know, I was making a remark in the chat. I know we're low on time. I considered even setting up a fund just for network states. But part of the problem is it's a little bit too early. It's a little bit like setting up a Bitcoin fund in 2010. Yeah, you could have done it. Yeah, you'd be the first. Yeah, you'd have the bragging rights. But it's almost a little bit too early for that. It'd be really hard to get LPs in at this stage. I'm not saying it's impossible. There are good, very good VCs out there, but you're going to really want to find your angels. And you're going to really want to find highly aligned angels that you don't have to educate, that understand sovereignty, understand geopolitics, and things of that nature. Those are going to be the types of people you're going to want to have conversations with, not some guy that just sold a chain of laundromats in Singapore for $5 million, and now you're hitting him up for a $100,000 ticket. Okay, that's going to be a lot harder to educate someone like that. But anyway, I'll yield back the balance of my time, but we got to do a lot more about this because so many of us deserve so much better. And we got to start talking about money. We're capitalists. Get the capital. Anyway, I'll stop. Thank you, Vahram. Please keep up this great work. You're the best. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, everyone. This was one of the most interesting discussions that we have had in this Network State and New Countries webinar series. And yeah, I also, join, people here and insist on that people working within this sector, this Network State, New Countries, intentional communities, private cities. These people definitely needs to have an access to fund in order to finance themselves, because this must be a full-time job. So it must be a full-time job because we are dealing with a big structure. We are dealing with a big challenge. We are talking about a Westphalia system, like a nation-state system, and people who work, who challenge it or whatever, who want to coexist, cooperate with them under any circumstances. These people need to work full time, and these people need to have decent, life. Just do this as a side job. It cannot work that way, because we are talking about a civilizational transition, social change. We are talking about building up a new global society, and you hardly build new global society working on it, for part-time or whatever. So this is very important, and I definitely share that what Andy said. Definitely, I'm subscribed to that idea. Definitely, we must also talk a lot about this, that those who work within this sector must get paid, and we need to structuralize this. Maybe we are very close to it, because we have started talking about this a lot. Maybe we are very close to getting to a solution. But this is one of the key things, actually, for the movement, entire ecosystem to succeed. And this is how history works, actually, and this is how political history works. So the people inside, within, must get engine to move forward, and that engine also is about getting paid and getting their expenses covered. So that's how I see, and many of us see the way forward. I truly hope that we are going to succeed. I am sure, actually, and I wish the best to all of us. Thanks a lot to the speakers, to the audience, to wonderful comments, questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't cover some questions here, but we are going to have more chances to do so, and the webinars are going to continue. Thanks a lot again, and see you all soon again. And we are going to have a press release, and it will be shared with all of you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, everyone.